Welcome to Zoom In, Zoom Out, your global look at news from Taiwan. I'm Rick Lowett. China uses its United Front work group to push its claims of sovereignty over Taiwan and to help it in its efforts to annex the country. The United Front has been using cultural and business exchanges across the strait to exert its influence and to destabilize Taiwan. A new report by Washington, D.C.-based think tank, the Jamestown Foundation, says Beijing's tactics are intensifying. Today, to discuss United Front work and influence in Taiwan and abroad, we're joined by China Studies Fellow at the Jamestown Foundation, Cheryl Yu. Cheryl, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So my first question is to ask you to introduce the United Front. We often hear a lot about it when it comes to China's influence on Taiwan, but could you explain what the United Front is?
So, United Front is one of the three magic weapons that the party uses to achieve its goal. So, according to Mao Zedong, he said that the purpose of United Front is to storm and shatter the enemy's positions. So, United Front work is essentially about cultivating friends and building relationships the party can exploit to advance its goal when necessary. According to Xi Jinping, the party aims to achieve the so-called great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, which is to rise to great power capability and status and replace the United States as the dominant power in the international order. And part of achieving the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation has always been to annex or unify Taiwan.
And what does the work of the United Front look like? What is China doing?
I think on the intentions of the party, so Xi Jinping has said that the party aims to achieve the so-called great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, which is to rise to the great power capability and status and replace the United States on the global stage. And Taiwan is a big part of its effort into achieving the so-called great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. In Taiwan's case, United Front activities are usually masked as, say, for example, local level exchanges, people to people exchanges, youth dialogues, or economic activities. So they actually look like just normal activities that other countries also do. But I think it's important to keep the party's intention in mind when looking at their activities, which is to try to build up a network of its friends in Taiwan that it can use when time comes. So they have been saying a lot that Taiwan is part of the PRC and has always been. So that's kind of like the message that they want to keep pushing out, and that China is great and Taiwan should be part of it, and eventually it had been and it should be.
A lot of the exchanges across the strait look fairly innocuous from the outside. There's a lot of shared culture, language, and business interest across the strait. How do we know that there is malicious intent behind these actions by China?
So I think essentially it would be to go back to what the party has been saying and understand what they mean by that. And so that's kind of like the general thing that I think that when engaging with the PRC that we should keep in mind. And a lot of times when they're carrying out these activities, it's traceable because you can see that the party would be using certain types of organizations or agencies. Although to the party, United Front work is essentially the work of the whole party. So every government agencies or party agencies have this responsibility to carry that out. But like Taiwanese citizens or the government, it's possible to trace each of the events and who the organizers are, who the sponsors are, who is speaking at events and things like that.
Recently, we know in particular there's been an uptick in industry exchanges between business people in Taiwan and China. What is China trying to do with these exchanges?
As part of the PRC's goal, they are trying to use these exchange to send their messages and to build. So on one hand, send the message to show that the PRC is great, and on the other hand, trying to use these exchange activities as a node to connect with people who attend the events, and then to eventually build out its network that it's able to access to be able to reach more people in Taiwan.
And this kind of work and this kind of influence is part of China's broader campaign against Taiwan. How does this fit in with other tools it uses, such as espionage, cyber warfare, political interference?
I think building out this United Front network for the PRC is very, it's kind of like the first step for them to do the next thing. So the first step is to build out this network, and then the next step it would be having their friends, so people in this network, to further do the things that they requested. So, for example, there are a few cases previously on espionage. We can see that how they got recruited as a spy is to they might involved in some kind of like activities engaging in the PRC. So that's kind of like the start of them using this network or trying to build out this network, and then eventually when the PRC make the request, they will be able to use them to get the things that they need for their goal.
How have you seen China's tactics in this area change?
I would say like United Front is essentially about building people to people connections, but as time evolves, there are new technologies that the party uses. For example, WeChat and other kinds of communication tools for them to like reach out to more people or build the network. But I think at the core, it's still building human connections and then utilize the relationship when it needs to.
Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te has flagged the danger of Chinese infiltration of Taiwan. He's flagged espionage, cyber attacks, and also coercion like this. How aware are Taiwan's public of the risk that they are facing when it comes to Chinese influence?
I think more and more people are starting to be aware. It's being discussed a lot in the media and on social media. And I think President Lai's commitment is definitely helping with moving the discussion forward. I think it's the first time that the president of Taiwan talk about national security threats clearly and directly. I know that he acknowledged the PRC as a hostile external force, which I think would help the society better understand or recognize the situation that Taiwan is currently in with the PRC. So I think people are getting more aware. Although currently the discussion has been a bit divided because of the political environment, but it's essentially good to have more debates and discussion so that more people would be aware of what the PRC is doing and be aware of its intentions.
China and Taiwan have a long and quite complicated history. They're obviously linked. There's shared culture, shared history, shared language. How easy is it to differentiate between innocent cultural exchanges and those that have a more malign intent by China?
I'm not sure if there's like real innocent cross-strait exchanges. United Front work um, is the work of the whole party. So every government agencies or party agency has this responsibility to carry out United Front activities and to help build out the relations. I think if the Taiwanese government, or generally like for people who are participating in events, if they look at the funders of the events, if they look at hosts or co-hosts of events, the participants, the speakers, they'll be able to tell that a lot of times it's linked with the United Front system in the PRC. I think it's important for Taiwan to keep in mind that the PRC's intention when engaging with them in events like that. So one will be able to discover the subtle difference between those activities that appear constructive on the surface and their underlying purpose of the advancing the party's goal, which is, in Taiwan's case, is to annex or unify Taiwan.
And you mentioned earlier the political situation in Taiwan. That's a lot of bad feeling between Taiwan's main political parties. The two main opposition parties have control of the legislature, whilst the ruling Democratic Progressive Party has control of the presidency and the cabinet. Does this kind of big bipartisan friction make Taiwan more at risk to influence by China?
I think that's definitely like one of the things that the CCP is trying to exploit, which is to cause this kind of like distrust and conflict from within. But we also did notice that the CCP has been, so like you said, like they're trying to build relationship with, say, the KMT. But we also see that the CCP is actually trying to build relationship with all parties, including the ruling party, because I think the CCP sees that, or they understand that there are factions within those parties. So they would want to try to cultivate individuals in both parties. In the opposition party of the KMT, or it can be easily observed on surface that its senior leaders are relatively receptive to put the party's United Front relationship building activities. They often meet with like top United Front system individuals. And I think just the past few days, they also had people who just met with the head of the Taiwan Affairs Office. But on the other hand, the CCP is also trying to cultivate relationship with the ruling party. Although usually when they are cultivating this kind of relationship, it's more subtle. It seems like both sides, so the CCP and also the DPP, don't want to highlight any connections it makes. So it makes things harder to observe. But I think recent, like say, espionage cases recently kind of demonstrate that the CCP has been trying to also cultivate relationship with individuals in the DPP. It's just that the way that they cultivate relationship is different from how they are doing it with the KMT. So with the DPP, it's more like they're trying to cultivate relationship with individuals from lower level, and then with the KMT, it's more like a top down.
Do you think Taiwan is doing enough to counter Chinese influence?
I think it's moving in the right direction. So the things that you said about President Lai um, giving talk about national security threats and directly acknowledging the PRC as hostile external force, I think that's definitely moving things into the right direction to help people better recognize the issue. But still, a lot more things that they can do to make things better. I know there are legislators trying to push for, say, the security clearance system in Taiwan, and also, say, a reporting system for officials visiting or traveling to the PRC. Those are the things that needs to be done at some point. But I think generally, currently, um, it's moving in the right direction.
And just to put this into a global context, Taiwan is obviously in a unique position in that it is claimed by China. But we know that China is trying to exert its authority, exert its influence all over the world. How does the United Front works that we've been seeing against Taiwan fit into the picture more globally? How is China trying to influence other countries around the world?
I would say the intention is very similar, the tactics is very similar, but when they're doing it elsewhere, so for example, in the United States, in the UK, um, or in Canada, Germany, they try to reach out to the people they know best first. So, for example, overseas Chinese community are a big target of theirs when they're conducting this kind of United Front network building events overseas. So they try to reach out to, say, a local hometown association individual in, say, Los Angeles or in New York, and then try to build out that network from there. So that's a little bit different from Taiwan, because Taiwan apparently, like, the language is the same and it's easier for the CCP to directly influence everyone in Taiwan. But when they're doing that globally, they try to reach out to overseas Chinese individuals or organizations as their first node to create a bigger network. So, and then they would use this network that they built to further their goal. So, for example, influencing local governments, or conducting technology transfers, or trying to advance their goal, something related to Taiwan. For example, they would try to use these local Chinese overseas organizations um, to push for the local government to pass a legislation that's against Taiwan, or claiming that Taiwan is part of the PRC, or their political goals like that.
Cheryl, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great to have your insights on the show.
Thank you, Rick, for having me. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
This has been Zoom In, Zoom Out. You can find more stories from Taiwan and around the world by going to the TaiwanPlus website or following us on social media. I'm Rick Lowett, and we will see you next time.
In the face of adversity, the power of truth.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.